This was the finale to the Orville Season 3, and it was good. All kidding aside, let's begin the review. Hello interwebs, I hope you are all doing well, and sadly, we have reached the end of the road for the Orville New Horizons, this time with Episode 10, Future Unknown. However, like the entire rest of this season, outside of a few things here and there, this was another strong outing for the series, and honestly, a really sweet one as well. Unlike last episode, which felt big, bombastic, huge, and quite honestly could have been the finale of the season. That typically would be the episode that you would end your season on, the big, epic story. But what I loved about this episode was that it took things down and gave us a much smaller, character-focused season finale, and what possibly may be the series finale as well, though hopefully that is not the case, and things are looking good considering that the Orville got put on Disney+, opening it up to a wider audience. So, fingers crossed on that front. But that being said, if this was the series finale for this show, outside of a few storylines here and there, like Ed's daughter, as well as the mysterious, Bioborg-like beings from episode 2 of this season, outside of those things, I feel like this wrapped up a lot of the major beats and storylines and character arcs that we've been seeing, not only throughout the show, but throughout the entire series so far, even if it is just giving us a little hint of them, like we got with the final shot of the show with Ed and Kelly. It gave us a sense of resolution, while also a promise for future stories going forward. So that's the kind of ending of both seasons and potential series finales that I like to see, where it's like, if this is the end, I will be very happy and feel a sense of finality, but I certainly wouldn't say no to more, and given this season, I am certainly excited and hopeful for more because this show has just continued to deliver. That being said, let's actually get into this review of the episode instead of just staying general. I'll go through this beat by beat. But before we get to that, I do wish to say apologies that I am not appearing on camera. I know I've been appearing on camera for a few other videos on this channel because my face has started to heal a little bit more from surgery, but allow me to be lazy for this one last review because I'm actually taking a trip tomorrow to go to Los Angeles for a wedding, so I've been running around. I look crazy and weird and my hair's all over the place, so allow my vanity a little bit of safety for tonight. But I will be back on camera starting with the next batch of reviews and next videos, which I think will be Star Trek Lower Decks coming in just a few weeks, so I am very excited for that. So be on the lookout for my Star Trek Lower Decks reviews very soon with my beautiful face. But let's not talk about the other sci-fi Star Trekian-like comedy. Let's talk about the Orville. So, getting into this beat by beat, we start off the episode with Isaac going about his daily life and his sort of Bachelor in Paradise song. Thought that was sweet. And then we get to hear that we're getting basically a renewal of vows and sort of a remarriage of Clyden and Bortis. And the way Bortis describes this, and we actually do get to see it, is actually really beautiful. Like, chasing your lover through the trees and then having sex in the woods, like, damn, that's kind of what I want to do for my marriage ceremony. And it also feels very Mocklin, right? It does feel like the chase and the hunter and the hunted sort of thing. But also, I do want to point out that while they are both single-sexed, species, or at least most of their culture is seen that way and built around that concept, even though that is inaccurate, as we know, the fact that there is a hunter and a hunted does speak to the fact that there are two gender roles in this society. So that sort of speaks to, despite people being within, the same sex, they can have different gender roles within a society because gender is a social construct. Anywho, leaving that aside, I just thought it was a good way to exemplify that, even though the episode wasn't about it. I did like to see this whole ceremony. It was really wonderful. The fact of them just running around the woods was funny, but oh my gosh, I feel so bad for the actors. I mean, they probably had fun, but just must have been so hot in those costumes that they were wearing, running around what looks like Big Bear. If anyone knows Big Bear Lake area near Los Angeles, it can get pretty hot if you are there during a certain time of year. So hopefully they weren't getting too hot there. We also get a nice little Gordon reference with the rock throw. I thought was very, very nice. That was all very fun. Then we learned that we are returning to Sargus 4, which is the social media planet from, I believe, season one. It was like an early season one episode where Lamar almost got killed, where there was this sort of social media, like, cancel culture narrative on that episode. I will say, I appreciate what that episode was doing, but it was one of those, I am about a girl from season one of the Orville. It was one of those episodes that I don't think the one-to-one with our society was perfect, just because, while I do get, like, social media abuse, and that is definitely a thing online, 100%, and that's sort of what the episode was talking about generally. I do think it missed a couple things with, like, cancel culture ideas, with it being like some people weaponize cancel culture in actually order to prop up their brands, and the sort of distinction with that. So it's not an exact one-to-one metaphor that I thought was perfect, but it was one of the better episodes of season one, and I like seeing it sort of built out and expanded upon here. That's something you didn't really get to see in older Star Trek shows like The Next Generation, with these sort of coming back to us planet and learning more about it and getting to see a little bit more about it. And I thought that was great. But then we get Isaac asking Claire to marry him, and it was very awkward, but also very sweet. And I loved the argument that they had afterwards, with Claire sort of being like, "Oh, I'm glad my physical deterioration is going to be a problem." And this discussion about, "You're immortal, I'm not. Is that going to be a problem?" And then Claire kind of being taken aback that Isaac would actually care about her descendants and kids, and that's sort of like, "Oh, wow, my lineage is secure," sort of thing. And I get that would be appealing, even if that's not the reason that you should marry somebody. Then we get into this, scene where we have all the girls talking with each other, and I love them debating the pros and cons of dating Isaac and marrying Isaac. I did really love Ed coming into the room and being like, he was the one sober man, and he says, "Well, why don't you ask your kids?" And then Kelly saying, "You've been useful, sober man," and then Ed bowing and going out. That was, I did think that was sweet. Those are the moments that I really loved the Orville for, these sort of like lived in, very human moments that you just you miss in a lot of TV shows. I think Star Trek, more recent Star Trek, has started to give us those moments too. Like Strange New Worlds has really nailed it. Lower Decks has nailed it. Even Prodigy has nailed it to a degree. So I think just that moment, I love moments like that in any TV show, I guess is the best way to put it. Then we get a quick little funny moment with Gordon asking, "Why don't we play music on the bridge?" That is kind of great. But then we meet Lysella, who was the character from that episode, the aforementioned episode. Before, it was nice to see her return. Might have to go back and rewatch that episode, because it was just to remind me of everything about her. But I like that she sort of asked for asylum because of the world that she's on, and she makes good arguments. Like, look, it can be an oppressive regime. They might say it's just a developing culture or a vitriolic culture, but I thought that this was good arguments, and I like that Ed gives her asylum here. But then we get the scene where Isaac goes and asks everybody for advice on marriage, and Lamar gives terrible advice of like, "Oh, you should date around." And I was just like, oh no, you already see where this is going. And it reminded me of an episode that I kind of hated from season 2, where Isaac eventually broke up, Claire eventually broke up with Isaac, because there was sort of that kind of abusive moment where he was just kind of a jerk to her because of how he was impressed upon by, I believe, Lamar in that episode as well. So it was like, I disliked that episode because it kind of felt like a retread of Next Generation episode with Data, as well as making it kind of a little bit more crass in a way that I didn't find all that funny. So I'm like, oh no, I really hope they don't go that route. But they did do it well, I think, by having it come about in a mature way, and I think kind of fits the character of Isaac. So they basically redux that storyline, but in a much better way that I enjoyed. And then I liked Claire asking her kids whether to, whether she should marry Isaac. I think that's a great thing for a parent to do. Like, it's obviously on the parent to decide what she wants to do. And obviously she has to think about the kids, but also the parent deserves a life as well, and isn't sort of to be necessarily has to be dictated by the kids, but should be informed about their thoughts as well. But I like that they both give her the thumbs up. It would have been interesting to maybe see the I forget his name, but the older kid who did have a problem with Isaac way back in episode 1 be a little bit more reticent, or have had him come to like Isaac more over the season, like you get to return to him here and there, which we didn't really throughout the season. But as it is, I think that it works just fine, especially for what this episode was going for. So it's not a knock against the episode in any way, shape, or form. It's just been like, oh yeah, that would have been interesting, but clearly not the story that they were wishing to tell. But then we get Isaac, as I was saying before, going to ask Kelly to date him, and Kelly being like, no, don't do that. And I like that Kelly is very upfront with Claire about that. That was what happened. And Kelly also getting asked to be maid of honor, which was also very sweet. And then we also get Claire yelling at Isaac, being like, "Hey, no, we are together, no one else. Unfortunately, no polyamory for this couple. I would have... what's wrong with polyamory? Come on, maybe get a third in there." But we also do get her yelling at Lamar as well, which was a funny scene. I don't necessarily, like, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, Lamar should have exercised a little bit more caution, given, like, the fact that Isaac is so impressionable and everyone knows it. But also, like, Isaac is his own whole person, and he should be the one held responsible, not necessarily Lamar, for just giving his honest advice. So I don't know. It's a funny scene. I'm not like saying, oh, Lamar's awful or Isaac's awful, but I don't know. It's just one of those, like, I get what they're going for, but so that was interesting. But then, just to check in on the other storyline here, we do have Kelly talking to Lissa throughout this episode, and we kind of get, like, a lot of the explanation of a lot of the society around shows like Star Trek. I mean, clearly we're talking about the Orville. Orville isn't Star Trek, but come on, it's Star Trek. Like, a lot of what Kelly explains to her is Star Trek setup. We get discussions of post-scarcity society. We get discussions of screw capitalism, right? We don't need to work to survive. It's all about being able to pursue what you want to pursue, and asking questions of, like, that, that capitalism makes us think today. There's the sort of idea, well, if we don't have monetary goals, then how will anyone wish to work? People will just be lazing around. Poor people are just lazy. And I like this episode saying, screw that. Like, no, people actually do wish to work. They do wish to pursue their best selves. That's what Star Trek and shows like that are all about. And so I do like to see that sort of get explained here to her, as she's sort of like a 21st century gal like we are here in our world today. And then we get to see the really beautiful holodeck simulation. The VFX on that were great. I thought that was just gorgeous. The VFX department just had a great time in getting to show her the wonders of space. Then we also get her showing Kelly showing her the engine. And there was this conversation that was clearly meant to relate to today, like people hating each other and always angry at each other and not seeing each other. And I think that is a really good message. It is. One could argue it's a little bit both sidesy, in the sense that, like, I do believe that part of the reason that there are people so angry at each other nowadays is because it's been intentionally stoked by those who, are able to prop up their positions in power off it by spreading misinformation, by sowing division. So there is a sense that it's not just, like, people hating each other. There is, like, financial and sort of monetary gain that's being stoked by all of this. But again, that's a little bit of a lot to tackle in this episode. So the idea that Kelly is saying is the cure, though, for this, right? Either way, it is that we take, and I love her phrasing, taking a genuine investment in each other. I mean, that's infinite diversity and infinite infinite combinations, if I can say words, right there. I mean, the thing that Gene Roddenberry said in his famous speech was Star Trek was about taking delight in the differences of others and differences in life forms, taking delight in it. And that's what enables us to get to the stars, and is what makes us deserve it to go to the stars. To paraphrase Gene Roddenberry there. And so that's clearly what's being evoked here. And that is the cure for all of the stuff today, regardless if it's being intentionally stoked or not. It is about taking genuine investment in each other. And I thought that was a beautiful statement by Kelly, and I really liked how that was phrased. Then we get a few other scenes, though, where Gordon gets to be asked to be best man by Isaac, but then Bortis is like, I am funny. And I'm like, oh my God, all of that was just absolutely wonderful. Everything with Bortis this episode was truly great. One thing too, sorry, I just reminded myself, I want to go back a little bit. The stuff with Clyden and Bortis, I mentioned this last episode and people kind of pushed back at me, so I want to kind of explain myself a little bit here, where I said last episode that I was a little bit perturbed that Clyden's sort of back with the group, and everyone seems to have forgiven him, and there's sort of no notice to the fact that, like, the abusive way he treated Topa in, I think, episode 5 or so, and just generally, to be fairly honest, going all the way back to the beginning of the series. And people said, like, well, he asked for forgiveness and that was enough. My belief generally is that when you ask someone for forgiveness, that is the first step towards atonement, not the last. And it's not just that you actually have to prove it and work towards it. And certainly we can show that Clyden is doing that. Clyden is actually making that effort. It would have just been nice to see a little bit of, like, stops along the way. Again, I get why the show didn't do it. It's one of those, like, I understand why the story didn't go that way or didn't have time to develop that, and maybe we would have had it if they had another episode or two. But it is just one of those things, like, I do believe that it's about earning that. And again, people forgive at different paces. But it was something we'd very rarely see that in media. I think that's probably the best way to put it. We so rarely see that type of representation in media of someone earning the apology, not just getting it accepted wholesale after just getting an apology. So it's not necessarily wrong, and we can intuit that that happened between episodes or between scenes, because clearly months or weeks happen between every episode. But it is one of those things like, oh, I would have liked to see that. It's fine that it didn't necessarily, but I would have liked to see it more. I say all of that because I want to point out that Clyden was great this episode. Everything with Clyden was wonderful. He was just like overly excited, complete turnaround in character. All of that was just wonderful, and I deeply, deeply enjoyed it. So I don't want to poo-poo on Clyden. I did enjoy him this episode, and his story was great. It was just that one, we got to A to C, and I would have liked to see a little bit more B in between there. But that's being said, we do get our bachelor story, party. All of that was great. Seeing the difference between the girls' party and the boys' party. The Kalon stripper was hilarious. I was laughing my head off at that. And then also the Bortis being a bad Elvis and a boring Elvis was also very funny. All of that was just, I was laughing my butt off. From there, we also go back to Lissa, and we get her explain why the Orville crew can't interfere with her home planet, why they can't give her all this technology. And I liked this explanation of the Prime Directive that societies need to get to this place on their own before they're able to get to the stars. Again, kind of going back to what Gene Roddenberry's talking about, we need to be able to earn the right to be able to go to the stars. And I love this explanation more than I even like the Prime Directive in Star Trek. My problem with the Prime Directive in Star Trek was that it was this universal always rule that it always had to be the case, and there was no way to, there was no leniency given. And considering the fact that we saw, Captain Kirk and Picard breaking the Prime Directive all the damn time, it's one of those things where it's it's a rule that should have more leniency to it. And I'm just sort of yeah, it should be a very strict law, but I think there should be discretion given to captains to be able to make that discretion, or admirals if you even want to go that high up. But I think that was always my problem with the Prime Directive, that it became a always or all-time rule, to the point that when we got to Voyager and Enterprise, the show was bending over backwards to be able to try and justify it as a always rule, as opposed to back in the original series where it was a rule made to be broken. And so I like this explanation a lot more, where it's sort of talking about it more from the sense of them being able to get to a place where they can go out into the stars and see the beauty in others. And I thought that was a much better justification, though I still don't love it as an always rule, but I do think that this scene sort of elucidated exactly why the Prime Directive is a good rule, if not an always rule, if that makes sense. Continuing on Lysa's story, though, I did like that she had a sense of survivor's guilt of oh, I've escaped, but I should go back and help them. And then her trying to steal some technology to change the future. And then Kelly showing her, look, this is what happens if we try too fast. They will destroy themselves if you give them too much technology too quickly. It was kind of reminding me of Star Trek Strange New Worlds premiere episode of this season. It's pilot episode, where it kind of did a very similar thing. And I like both versions of it. The Strange New World one, I think, was trying to poke more at us today, by showing stuff of literally the January 6th insurrection and stuff like that in that episode. And I really like that very didactic message of look, this is about us. And I think there's a very similar message being given here. And that one was more on a political level, and this one was much more on an interpersonal level. And I think both of them are very valuable. I still tear up watching that opening scene from Strange New Worlds. And I think this was also really solid too. So I just like seeing those types of scenes. I think are really, really wonderful, and both of them worked in both shows. And I'm sorry to compare the two constantly, but obviously the shows beg comparison, and it just got me thinking about why I like these types of scenes, because they do kind of inspire me of we can do that. We can do better. It's we do need to earn it. It makes me think about how we today in our society should go for trying to be better people and move to a better humanity. And I think we can do that, even despite all the darkness that we have today. It's why shows like The Orville and Star Trek are so important, because they allow us to be inspired to believe that we can get there even in the darkest of times. So those types of scenes are just what makes me happy. And then it's kind of reflected in the ethos of our final scenes here, as we get the wedding between Isaac and Finn, Claire, and it was all just lovely. I mean, I thought all of it was just great. It was very symbolic. We got to see the Kalon showing up the entire planet for the wedding, which was very intimidating, but also very funny. But also showcase people come together, people form friendships, and across these big divides, you get to see people finding love in a very Romeo and Juliet-esque way, though thankfully less tragic than that. And I thought that just spoke to the ethos that this whole episode was talking about with Lissa, about building that better future. So all of that was great, and Lyssa staying on board was wonderful. The just jokes with Bortis giving the speech was also hilarious. All kidding aside, I thought was great, and Clyden just earnest sweetness was also very nice. But then we got Gordon's speech, which was also very wonderful. And then Alara showing up. Oh my gosh, it was so nice to see her. Great little cameo. It was nice to know that the actress is still appreciated and liked and wanting to be allowed to be back on the set and getting to be with the crew and possibly the series finale of the show. So again, this is a series finale. It was just nice to see her back here. But yeah, Gordon's song was very wonderful, and it ended out the season on a very strong note with a little hint towards Ed and Kelly maybe getting back together and quite possibly the series. Like I said, I do hope the show gets renewed because this was a very wonderful and beautiful episode that just reminded me of everything that I love about this type of storytelling, about Star Trek type shows, and just showcased to me why I've loved this season of the Orville. I have made no bones about the fact that season 1 and 2 of the Orville I had a lot of frustrations with. And I'm not going to put aside that I don't think there are a few things in this season of the Orville that I have had some frustration with here and there. Some of it, to be honest, quite frankly, just based off the fact that it was building off these sort of rockier foundations of season 1 and 2. I'm thinking of like Topa's storyline, which I think was handled excellently this season, but is still a little bit problematic just because of the issues with the metaphor from seasons 1 and 2, and I've talked about that ad nauseum. And a couple boring episodes here and there, like episode 3 I still don't really like. But with those negatives aside, this has been a truly stellar season of television. There were some people saying like, oh, look, this season's been predictable. And yeah, I'll admit, like every episode of every show of this season, I've been like, yeah, there's been some predictability to it. I've kind of seen where every episode's going to go. I was never like overly shocked by any episode. But just because a show isn't like, crazy and twist and turny and Game of Thrones-esque, doesn't mean it's not good. Sometimes we like to see things that are executed, like stories executed well, and give us these little stories and fables and ideas. And I think that this show really did it. It showed what I loved about shows like The Next Generation and evolved that formula a little bit more in ways that I think Brannon Braga especially wanted to do with shows like Voyager and Enterprise, where it was like a little bit more continuity, tying things in together, having things recur a little bit more while still being episodic overall. I think that was something, I'm actually been a big fan of Brannon Braga generally. I really love his writing on Next Generation and even Voyager and Enterprise. But I do feel like a lot of the problem was he was held back a lot by certain people, both executives and a certain executive, let's just say. But I do think that he is a strong storyteller. And again, obviously, he's not the only one here. There's Seth MacFarlane and many others writing on the team. But I just think about Brannon Braga, especially because it's like, oh, this is clearly him getting to kind of do what he always wanted to do with those shows and not be sort of stymied a little bit by it. So I just sort of think about that. That all being said, that's the end of this season. I liked it. This was a great episode, a great season, and a great end to this season overall, if possibly the series. What did you think, though? I love your thoughts down in the comments below. I am going to go get ready for my trip tomorrow. I've got an early flight, so it should be a fun time there. But yeah, I will see you all next week. I'll have a video up on Monday. Don't forget to check out my tribute to Nichelle Nichols that I posted yesterday as well. And also, I will be reviewing Star Trek Lower Decks very, very soon, and possibly some other things as well. So beyond all of that, thank you so much, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to subscribe to my main channel. Link is below. Beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper.